Okay. All right. So I am conducting the interview. This is Summer King, and I'll have our two Louisville interviewees introduce themselves. And if you can give me both your married and maiden names.
Okay. My name is Ady Kupfner. My maiden name was Delforge. And I have lived in Louisville. Well, I did live in Louisville from the time I was 4 years old, and belonged to a pioneer family of Louisville, and have loved the community, and it's always going to be home to me. And let's see, what else? Well, I grew up, went to school, graduated in 1959, right at the beginning of all the conflict, and had a wonderful childhood.
Yeah, great. And then if you want to go, and then I'll ask more questions as we get started.
Janice Mudrock. Maiden name was Brimble. I graduated from high school in Louisville in 1965. My mother was born in Superior, my father in Louisville. This is home, always will be home. I think that, anything else? I don't know.
No, that's good. One thing I am curious about, I heard you say Mudrock, and I've also heard Mudrock.
That's interesting. When I got married, my mother-in-law said, you need to pronounce it Mudrock, otherwise nobody spells it right.
Okay, that's true.
That was Cleo, and Cleo worked for the city for many years.
Yeah.
And but that's how that came about, with me saying Mudrock rather than Mudrock, because my husband said Mudrock.
And it's foreign to my ears.
Yeah.
Mudrock is, and I have many arguments about
Roger also did
about Mudrocks.
Yeah,
Mud rocks.
And it just became, as I worked, it was much easier for me, and that was my mother-in-law that did that. So.
Yeah, and Cleo was right. Except.
Okay. All right, so you grew up across the alley, you were saying, so were you friends? Well, you were quite an age difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was closer
Little
to my
bit.
sister.
Yeah.
Well,
Lonnie and Roger.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
That was the younger generation.
Mm-hmm. All right, so can you tell me, Ady, we'll start with you. Can you tell me about growing up in Louisville? What were some of the things you did for fun in maybe as early as elementary school, but more leaning towards high school? And where did you eat? You know, that type of stuff.
Okay, well, I went to St. Louis school till I was in the 4th grade. And I never did figure out if the nuns asked me to leave or if I told them I was leaving. Because I do remember one time telling the sister I was leaving, and I walked home. And as I got to my house, my mother had just driven up with her friend, and she looked at me and she said, "And what are you doing home?" And I said, "I told Sister Conada I was going home and I'm not ever coming back." She says, "Well, you turn your little butt around and get it back up that street and apologize." So I had to stay till I was in the 4th grade, and then I got out.
Then you got out. When do you think that was that you tried to escape?
Oh, I know when it was. It was like the 3rd grade.
3rd grade.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that was when it was. Then I went to public school at St. Louis. Not St. Louis, but Louisville Elementary, and went through and ended up in 2 different classes. So I have friends, well, I have friends all over the place, but I was held back in the 6th grade because I just wasn't getting it. Well, I started school really early at St. Louis, and you know, being 5 and 6 years old, and then you were in a room where they had both classes, 1st and 2nd grade together, 3rd and 4th grade together. So it was a lot for a young kid, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, when I started, I was in with the class of 1958, and when I ended, I graduated with the class of 1959.
Okay. And tell me about high school. What did high schoolers do for fun in Louisville?
Well, it depended on what group you were in.
Yeah.
And Fortunately, I guess I would say that I was in a group that we did have a lot of fun. We, of course, we had the high school games. That was the important part of our high school years, is the football games and the basketball games and cheerleading and being in the band and then being a little on the wild side and sneaking off to have a cigarette during lunch and those things we weren't supposed to do. But it was a wonderful era to grow up in. We had snake dances for the homecomings and a big homecoming bonfire, and we would snake dance all the way down Main Street from the high school, which is now the middle school. And we would go in the restaurants on a Saturday night in Louisville. They were busy. I mean, the spaghetti houses were just, people were lined up around the block to get in. Mm-hmm. And so here comes all these high school students snake dancing through the restaurant, and the waitresses with their trays of spaghetti and meatballs trying to dodge. And so those were, the fun things. And we had sneak days where we went off to Glenwood Springs and for 3 days when we were seniors. And the camaraderie of friendship. I still get together with, well, now we're down to 6 of my high school, 7. No, Barb doesn't count. My sister Barb. 6 of our high school friends, and one time there was 11. Mm-hmm. And we get together twice a month. Once to go to one of our houses, whoever that is has a lunch, and then we play poker. I decided at just about 79 that I was going to teach these ladies how to play poker. We would win the most funniest video. Let me tell you, if somebody filmed us. What are we playing? What do you call that? Follow the bitch? And then once a week we just meet at one of our houses and play again and have, popcorn and that type of thing. But it's the camaraderie of those friendships over the years that have always stayed very, very strong.
Yeah.
That I feel is the gift. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about your brother, Roger, right? Uh-huh. And how much younger than you is he? And tell me about sort of when he was going to high school, was it similar? The similar camaraderie, similar time? Uh-huh. What year did he graduate?
He graduated
65.
in 65.
Oh, so he was in your class.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have it in my notes here.
Okay, so that might be a good time then to switch over. So why don't you do the same thing if you don't mind? Just tell me a little bit about your, what you did growing up for fun memories growing up here in Louisville, and then especially focused on high school.
I grew up in Louisville at the end of Jefferson. In elementary school, it was friends. We played jacks. There was the neighborhood where all of the kids got together. We played in the streets at night, played kick can, and just played in the streets till the lights came on. Mm-hmm. We knew it was time to go home for lunch when the siren blew, because they blew the fire siren at noon every day, and so you knew it was time to go home and have lunch. High school was very much what Ady says. I still get together with 6 of my high school friends that we have lunch at least once a month, get together randomly throughout the rest of the month. We did very much the same things. Our activities revolved mostly around school. Football games, down to kolaches or the Blue Parrot after the game to drink coffee and eat French fries, and bless the waitresses, I'm sure we never tipped anybody.
I did. My mother was.
Well, your mother. But it was a great time to grow up.
Yeah.
I mean, the economy, I guess, was good. I mean, I think we were poor, but I don't remember being poor.
Yeah.
I remember just the family and being together. I mean, we got together on Sunday with aunts and uncles. It was just a great time to grow up.
Yeah.
And then in 65, when we graduated, most of the guys within a year were in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before that, so you were 59.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, there was probably not any thought of Vietnam.
Not then.
Right.
Mm-mm. We were the post-war World War II kids,
Mm-hmm.
and I said we grew up poor in a rich town or rich in a poor town. I can't remember, but like she said, we grew up. You got up in the morning in the summertime. You got up in the morning. You had your breakfast and you left and you went and you ran through the fields. You went to the creek and waded. You swam, in the mini ditch, and you knew you had to be home by lunch. And then you left again. You were barefoot, fancy free. Our parents were busy taking care of what needed to be taken care of, their jobs and doing things that needed to be done. So we weren't focused on that much. So we ran, and if we were up 5 blocks away and fell and skinned our knee, the neighbor would come out with a cure comb, wipe it off, put a Band-Aid on it, and say, okay, you're gonna live. And by the time you got home, your mother knew that you had fallen and so.
Yeah.
And I remember one incident of wanting to go to the hygienic swimming pool in Boulder. And my mother was working at the Blue Parrot, and my sister and I decided we were going to hitchhike to Boulder. I mean, she's 2 years younger than me, and I'm probably 14 or something like that. And so we were on Main Street hitchhiking. And before I knew it, my mother, who was working at the Blue Parrot, drives up. She didn't have a driver's license. Drives up in Wilma Thurlaway's car and says, "And what do you think you're doing?" "Oh, we were going to go to the hygienic to go swimming." "Oh, is that right?" "Well, no, I don't think so. Get in this car."
Yeah.
But that was the freedoms that you had as a child. You weren't micromanaged. That's what we weren't.
Yeah.
And we survived.
We created our own fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
we would sled down Jefferson Hill in the winter,
Yeah.
and the cars knew to watch out for us.
And sometimes they blocked it off, so that we had to free run from the hill all the way. Well, we always tried to make it down to the school, but that was, yeah, it was.
Because Louisville Elementary had the big fire slides,
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
and
Metal.
we slide down those in the summertime.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've heard they got very hot.
They got
They
very
did.
hot.
Terrible.
But again, it was wherever you were, they took care of you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was,
The community watched out for the kids.
and anything you did, you could count on your mother knowing it before you got home.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Louisville. Yeah.
All right. So by 65, you said probably about the next year, most of the men had been drafted. Did you feel in your high school that was hanging over people's heads, or were they still pretty carefree?
We were very carefree. I mean, I don't think Vietnam was as much in your face in 65 until the draft. My husband got his draft notice on his 19th birthday.
Okay.
And Roger and his friends, Donnie Cummings and
Greg.
Greg Camps, as soon as they graduated from high school, they had a dream, and it was to go to Europe. And they saved up enough money for a junket, I guess is what you call it, a ship, that got them to Europe, and they hitchhiked all over Europe. and stayed in youth hostels. And many stories came home from that, of the highs and the lows. And I remember a couple that were very interesting. I remember Roger saying he spent his 18th birthday in a field, in a sleeping bag, in rain, thinking about, maybe I wish I was home.
Yeah.
You know. And then one time they got separated, of the three of them, and it was, you know, there's no cell phones, there's no nothing. How are we going to ever find each other to get back together? But they did. They, you know, there was destinations that they had, and so they all ended up at this one destination, and were quite relieved.
Yeah, I bet.
And then one story that really hit home was they were in France, and they were down and out. I mean, I think they only had a couple $100 in each pocket when they left, you know. And they had no money, and they were sitting in this little park, and this Frenchman come up and sat down next to him and asked him, you know, where are you from? And they said, well, we're from the United States. And then he said, well, where in the United States? Oh, you never know, you know, the little town. Well, where is that? And they said, oh, it's between Boulder and Denver, and it's called Louisville. Well, they learned what a small world it is, because the man said, yes, I know where Louisville is. He said, I eat spaghetti at a restaurant called the Blue Parrot, and my brother broke down and started crying.
Oh.
Because that's where his mom, you know,
Right.
our mom worked.
Wow.
And they all did. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, it's like we're home. Somebody from home. And like I said, they were broke. And he gave them money and bought them their lunch, gave them some money, and wished them well.
Wow.
So they had a wonderful time.
Yeah. I actually read about that in the Louisville Times.
Yeah.
They recorded a little bit about their trip. Do you think that they took that trip thinking about Vietnam, sort of like a, you know, we want to go on this trip because we don't know what the future might hold, or this was just something?
No, I think it was a dream that they had, but by the time they left, they knew, you know, that they were probably going to be drafted. And Roger got his draft a letter while he was over there, just, yeah,
Really?
before going to return home.
Do you know what country he was in when he got it?
I don't remember for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe back in England, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so he knew what he was flying home to. He knew, I mean, they saw what was happening over there. And that his buddies had already shipped out. And when he got home, it was tough, because we all were seeing what was happening over there, didn't understand it. And here you have these kids fresh out of high school. Kids. And it wasn't like it was in the Second World War, where our country had been attacked. So kids got out of high school, they were gung-ho to go, you know, and that without ever thinking about, I'm going over there and I'm going to be shot at. And I mean, you know, I'm sure it passed through their mind, but they were going to defend the United States. And these kids they didn't know, why are we even over there, you know? I don't think most of us knew, why are we in Vietnam? And coming home and facing that, my brother had a very long, tough conversation, because he didn't want to go. And I didn't want him to go, but I knew he had to go.
Yeah.
And we discussed Canada, and he just said, hey, I don't want to go. And I told him, it's tough, but you have to, because you could go to Canada and live with that the rest of your life, or you can go do what your country's asking you to do and pray to God you'll be okay. And he did, you know, he did what was right. And then after we had that conversation, I thought, who am I to tell him? Who am I to tell him what to do with, you know? But thinking about going over there and facing what they were facing in those jungles and being wounded, shot at, or laying in the ground of a foreign soil, dying and not being with the people who loved you,
Yeah.
you know, with people who didn't care about you except your buddies, and if you got shot during a conflict, they didn't have time to wait, you know, you laid there and you died, and it was tough, you know, it was a tough time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Tommy, I heard a story about when he got his draft notice that he took his $5,000 out of the bank and went to Vegas. Yeah. So why don't you tell me that story in your own words?
He decided that it was going to be his last hurrah. If he was going to go die, he was going to have one heck of a time before he did.
Mm-hmm.
So he took his money, he went to Vegas, and he spent 2 weeks in Las Vegas. And he had the time of his life. And then he came home, and he got picked up the night before he was shipping out for DUI. And
That's right.
and the cop said, I'm going to have to take you to jail. And Tom said, okay.
Yeah, great. I'll be safer there.
He said, I'm leaving for Vietnam tomorrow, so jail sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And the cop said, no, I'll take you home.
Was this here in Louisville? A Louisville cop?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about Tom, what do you want me to call him?
Whatever.
Doesn't matter. Did you meet him you knew him, obviously. Did you start dating in high school?
We dated off and on throughout high school.
Okay.
After high school, I moved to Texas for a couple years. And when Tom got home from Vietnam, he was stationed at Fort Hood, which was about 60 miles from where I was living.
Okay.
So we reconnected, and when he came home, I came home with him.
Yeah.
And we got married and had a couple kids.
Yeah. So did you get engaged while he was serving there in Fort Hood? Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
But you just came back as his serious girlfriend.
Yeah.
Got
I guess was that
I think, yeah.
it. Clearly pretty serious.
Yeah, we were married for 49 years before he passed away.
Yeah, wow.
And, but Tom never talked about Vietnam at all. And it was right at about 50 years since he come back. They had a reunion in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
And I watched 5 men come together like 50 years had never happened. The bond between those, I'm going to cry. The bond between those 5 men was unbelievable. And after that, Tom started talking to me more about Vietnam and what had happened. Because he was shot over there. He had a bullet go through his helmet, take the hair off the top of his head. And he said the first thing he did, he turned around to the soldier behind him and said, "Is my head gone?"
God bless him. Yeah.
And so it was a hard time for those guys.
Yeah.
They, like I said, they were kids. Tom was 19.
Yeah.
My granddaughter's 22.
Right.
And she says, I can't believe Papa was just a teenager. And I said, yeah.
And these were 2 kids that played in the mud together, Roger and Tommy. I mean, Tommy lived down the street from us.
Yeah.
And, you know, they grew up as brothers. And
I mean, Tom called Esther mom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he did. Well, a lot of the kids in town did, because our house was kind of the hangout.
Yeah.
And those are stories in itself.
So I was talking to Ron Buffo, and he told me a little bit about that, but he thought that it was like the first week or the first day or something.
It was the first week.
The first week.
Tom was in country.
And he got shot in combat
in
the head, but it went around his helmet, or it went over?
It went in the side and
okay.
just took the hair
Just
off.
grazed.
He didn't even say it cut him.
Wow.
It was just straight through.
Wow.
How lucky. How lucky.
Mm-hmm.
They would walk chest deep in the rice paddies.
Mm-hmm. So he was boots on the ground.
He was boots on the ground.
I remember when talking with Tommy a little bit about it just before he died, but when we grew up, the war movies were, you got to see a little bit of airplanes bombing, but they turned into love stories. It was romance, You didn't see what they were going through. And I remember the first time I saw Platoon. It was an eye-opener for me. And I thought, how stupid. That we didn't realize that it wasn't the John Wayne and the Henry Fondas. These kids are over there. And when Charlie Sheen was in that trench in the water like Tommy, and that spider and the Viet Cong were just beyond, and you couldn't make a sound. And that big old bug or spider was crawling up his arm onto his neck. I'm going, oh my God, how did those boys do what they did? And that's probably, well, I was always patriotic because of my uncles, but that's when I really began to appreciate exactly what it was all about.
And these guys were fortunate because when they came home to Louisville.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where they weren't abused. But as they came home, landing in San Francisco or wherever their flight brought them, they were just berated.
Spit out.
Called baby killers. They took their uniforms off.
Yeah.
Before getting off
of the plane because
they
knew
about that. Yeah. But even in Louisville.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, they were turned away. Well, not turned away, but they went to the VFW. It was the holiday time, and I'm not going to name any names. I don't want to do that because they're friends and that. But one of the fathers said, "Here, gave him some money. He says, go down to the VFW and be with the rest of the vets." And the father was a vet too. So they did. And when they were greeted at the door, it was, well, what are you doing here? Like they did not get.
Their service wasn't as important as the World War II guys.
World War II. You were drafted, but you did what your country asked you to do, what your president asked you to do. No different. But you were kind of scum.
Yeah.
And when they went back, the father asked, why are you back here? And they told him what happened. He said, you come with me. And he went down and he took him in, and that's what he told them. They did exactly what you did for their country, and they should be welcome. But it was a time when all of the news was about the baby kill, the killings over there, and people just like today, you take a few incidences, and it's everybody's doing this. All these kids are over there killing, you know, these families and stuff. Well, you know, they befriended a lot of those families, and when they walked into their village, they were set up by the Cong, because they were part of the Viet Cong, to blow them to pieces, you know. So it was just a lot of misunderstanding and a lot, you know. And thank God, I think our country's healed from it to a point.
And Afghanistan and Iraq did a lot for the Vietnam vets.
Okay.
Because after we entered into Afghanistan and Iraq, the Vietnam vets were held up as good guys.
Okay.
I watched Tom put Vietnam vet plates on his truck. I watched when we would go somewhere, he always wore a cap or a t-shirt that identified him as a Vietnam vet.
Yeah. After Iraq, you're saying.
After Iraq and Afghanistan. So I was glad to see that camaraderie.
The healing.
The healing that happened, where people would, at the gas station, walk up to him and say, "Can I shake your hand and thank you for your service?"
Yeah.
And I think, well, I read it just recently about one of the healing factors was the monument in Washington, the wall.
Yeah.
And that was from a veteran who had he said, no, these people are not going to be forgotten.
Yeah.
I think his name was Jan Scruggs, or I'm not sure, but, and it was his dream, and he fought, I mean, tooth and nail, because people were against it in the beginning and everything. And then, I can't remember what happened, but people start sending money in and then it started to become a reality, and then Congress started listening, and it happened, and it's and he said every man and woman's name who perished in that war will be on that wall, and that was
And you can make scratchings on the wall.
Yeah.
Where they will help you find a veteran's name, and you can go in and do rubbings on the wall to get it. Tom did that.
Yeah. Of people that he had served with and lost. Yeah.
Yeah, we lost one boy from Lafayette, Johnny
Yeah.
Manzanares.
Yeah. Tell me about that. So, do you remember what year that was? It was early, I think.
It was early in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How did that hit this area?
it was devastating, just devastating. My sister had dated him, and
Really?
and the Manzanares family, they were a joyful family, Maggie, and we bowled with Maggie, and
Was Ted's brother.
Right.
and it did. It just took the town down. I mean, you know, the grieving, and then, you know, that just brought it so much closer to home that, oh my God. When you think about, you know, the mothers and the fathers and that whole time of knowing your son's over there, you know, Cleo, and
She would say if she caught a vision of the postman coming up on the front porch to deliver the mail, how her heart would fall to her feet.
Oh, wow.
That it was somebody coming to tell her that Tom had been shot.
Yeah.
And Roger was, I mean, I guess lucky, when he was talking to my oldest brother Don especially, about going in, you know, and Donnie told him, he says, Raj, when you get in there and you get through with boot camp, he said, you take any schooling that they offer, so you get into something, you know, that you're going to be contributing to. And he was took radio. He was a communications, so he went to New Jersey and went through a communication school, and he had the top clearance. So when he went over, that was what he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now he was stationed in Okinawa, right?
Yes.
Now did he never went to Vietnam or Guam? Okay.
No, but he talked several times about sitting one time at a cafe and one of the troop trucks went by and Jimmy King, I get goosebumps. Jimmy King was on it. And he said, "Hey, Delforge." And Roger said, "Oh my God," and start trying to run out. It was, yeah. And one time, I think Greg Camps, I think he was someplace and he saw Greg.
Huh.
Here you are over in these foreign
Right.
countries and you're seeing your buddies go.
Right.
Yeah.
Who was the first person that you said?
Jim King.
Jim King. Okay.
Jimmy King, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was a Louisville boy?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Older than Roger. Well, let's see, when
He's
I don't know when he graduated, but he was,
Maybe 2
several
years.
years,
Yeah.
several years ahead of,
Okay.
ahead of me,
Yeah.
and, but it was tough.
Now, did he feel, one thing I've kind of picked up on, and maybe you won't know the answer to this, but did he feel like there was ever any separation when he got back between the Vietnam vets who had been boots on the ground in Vietnam and maybe the people who served on ships, or like for himself being in Okinawa? Or did they just not even get together and have?
I never felt like he felt like that at
Okay.
all. I mean,
Okay.
because he had Tommy and other friends, Szymanskis, and, other friends that had
Yeah.
been over. No, I never
And did they all stay together as like, once they got back to Louisville,
pretty much.
Yeah.
there was some camaraderie about having
Oh,
served
yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Not together, but having served at the same time in
Yeah.
several places. Yeah.
And again, they didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just this part of their life that was done,
Right.
and they were finished
Mm-hmm.
with it.
Well, it was
Well,
horrible.
they were finished with it, except for the emotional part
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they all carried
Yeah.
with them until the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never felt like there was a separation that
Okay.
way.
But some separation between World War II vets
Oh, definitely.
and Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Korea just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. What
true.
happened to Korea? Yeah.
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 We were talking about that actually. So the 1989 Labor Day, Ron Buffo and the Louisville Museum had just opened, and they had a big Vietnam get together.
Mhm.
Now, do you remember, did Roger and
Tom
Tom
went.
go?
I'm sure. I don't know.
Probably.
For sure, but I'm sure he probably did.
Yeah. So he went, and did he appreciate that? Was
Oh,
that?
yes, he appreciated it. He carried one of our high school teachers, Mr. Spangenberg,
Mhm.
wrote a poem for them, and Tom carried that poem.
Yeah.
What do you mean? In Vietnam he did?
No,
Oh, but he carried it.
after.
Yeah.
That's the poem.
Yep, and we
Yes.
have that.
Yeah.
And I'll probably reprint that again.
I would. Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of says it all. I mean,
Now tell me about Mr. Spangenberg, because I've heard a lot of things about Mr. Spangenberg.
She's better at that than me.
Did you have him or no? Because he came
no.
later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Spangenberg was a very large man,
Yes.
and he would not allow you to use a pencil.
Okay.
What?
It is
Okay.
a pencil.
Okay. Yeah.
And he would yell, scare the living daylights out of someone threw a pencil one day in his class across,
Yeah.
to somebody who needed it. And he went over and started pounding on the desk. Don't ever do that again. And apparently, sometime during his teaching,
Yeah.
that had happened, and the pencil went in someone's eye.
Oh my goodness.
I was a smoker at the time, and we would go across the street to Jensen's at lunchtime and smoke. And I came out of Jensen's walking back across the street to the high school, and I still had a cigarette in my hand. And he came up and he put his arm around me and he said, "Janice, would you kindly put your cigarette out inside Jensen's and don't ever let me see you walk across the street with one again. And it's like, yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
kind
sir.
of teachers we had though back then. I mean,
Yeah.
But he was a great teacher. He taught history,
Yeah.
and he could make history come alive.
Mm-hmm.
that's the wonder.
You know?
Now, did he talk about Vietnam at all?
No.
So current events? No,
No.
not about Vietnam.
You know, because we graduated in '65, and
It was
I
just
mean,
right.
Vietnam wasn't even on our radar. I
Yeah.
don't think.
Okay. Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you feel like almost all the boys from your class ended up serving. And you would have been in Louisville at that. Well, you both were in Louisville. Well, I guess you moved to Texas. Did Louisville feel empty of young men? Like, were there so many boys that went that there was a noticeable void of like,
Yes,
so many men are gone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, I remember talking about that. That it was like you walk down the street, or it was just quiet.
Hmm.
It was different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to clarify a little bit about their homecoming for both men. So you said that they were lucky to come back to Louisville, but then we talked a little bit about some of the negatives. But in general, did you feel like Louisville was pretty supportive and positive of the boys, if not the war?
I think because it's a community where everybody knows everybody and everything. I think that they were okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they came back as Roger and Tom. They
Right.
didn't come back as Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
They came back as the guys they were when they left.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That that being raised in a small town, especially during those years, it's just you were brothers. You were
There were only about 1,200 people in Louisville at the time.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, I never felt like except the one incident at the VFW that time, that Roger ever felt like he was shunned or anything here in town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, can you say who the dad was that took him down and stood up for him, or you didn't want to say that?
It was Donnie Cummings' dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the three boys that went to Europe were Donnie, Roger,
And
Camps.
Greg Camps.
and Greg Camps.
And Roger had asked Jerry Ratliff, but Jerry couldn't go.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And did Greg end up serving as well? Yes, because you said that he may have seen him in Okinawa.
Mhm.
Okay. And now Donnie passed away, right?
Right.
After he came back.
Mhm.
And when that happened, was that after Donnie had passed away, or was Donnie one of the boys going down to the VFW?
Oh, he was one of them.
He was one of them.
I think it was Roger and Donnie. That they were the two. I don't know that Greg was with him.
Yeah.
I just remembered them discussing it in the interview I did with them,
Mm-hmm.
with the two of them.
Okay.
So I think it was just the two of them.
Okay. Okay. And then I was going to ask a little bit about the sort of feeling for you all living in Louisville in that time period. You said you kind of didn't know why the war was happening. There was not really any. So was there any sense of patriotism? I know it's not like World War II where you're all very proudly defending your country, but was there a sense of, we're proud of these boys going off there, or was it just more fear and what is even happening?
I think we were patriots, period.
Yeah.
Not because of Vietnam or even World War II. I mean, I think we were just patriots.
Yeah.
Patriotism was a part of the fundamentals of our life.
Yeah.
I mean, we stood for the flag.
Well, I had two uncles that fought in the First World War,
Mm-hmm.
and they're on the stone out at the cemetery. And my Uncle Frank, it was my grandmother's oldest brother, and then I think Felix was one of the middle kids. But Felix was shell-shocked, and when he would show up home once in a while, they would never know, and wasn't in the family like he had been before he left. It was just, he didn't come home the same. And my Uncle Frank, he lived not in our home. We lived in a little 4-room house on Grand Street, and he lived in the shanty. We call it the shanty, where he slept, and but he ate at the main house, and he was always there. As a matter of fact, he is one of the founders of the American Legion Auxiliary, and like the 3rd commander, I think. And he was a character. He was a town character. But when we got our television, black and white, we were one of the last ones in town to get one, and he would come up and sit there at night and watch with us. And when it would sign off, I think it signed off at 10, something like that, and they would play the national anthem. And that man stood and he saluted the whole time and he would look over, and if we weren't on our feet, we were reprimanded when it was over. You love your country. I fought for your country, and he instilled in us what it was about, and it's very, he made us very proud Americans. Yeah, very proud.
My grandfather fought in the Spanish-American War.
Oh, how about that? I didn't know that. Wow.
My Grandpa Green, and his uniform is at the museum.
Okay. Now, was he here in Louisville?
He was in Superior.
So then I think he might be the only person, because I know there was only one man who fought in the Spanish-American War from Louisville, and that might
have been Joe Malcolm.
Mr. Malcolm.
Okay.
That would have been Joe Malcolm,
Okay.
and my grandpa was in Superior.
Okay.
And,
But still, because that's, wow. The town was really new then.
And
the kids with the Malcolms lived on the corner of our street.
Okay.
And so I can remember, him walking by and him showing us his sword. Well, you could see it, when you walk by, and we could ask him questions. And then my kids, that's one of the biggest memories they have, is Mr. Malcolm taking them in and letting them see their sword from the Spanish-American War.
So I had a thought, and so I'm just asking you to conjecture with me. Do you think that the reason that people in Louisville were so patriotic is because it was a town of immigrants, and they were just really connected to, this is where we chose? And I know, especially for some of the Italian families, that's something I've kind of heard. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. They immigrated here for a reason, and they began their life here, working the coal mines, and a very hard life, but it got them away from what they were trying to get away from. And I think that when they came, they didn't speak their language.
Right.
It was very important for them to learn English, and they didn't want their children to learn their language. They wanted them to be English, And now, it's very different, and I think it's great that it's different, because children are bilingual now, and that's a wonderful thing. I wish I was bilingual.
me too.
Opens up a lot of doors for you, with friends and that. But no, very, very patriotic.
Yeah.
Very. And in your family life, during the war, during Vietnam and that, there was patriotism. Our flag flew.
And I think we made sure our children shared that patriotism.
Yeah.
We taught them, you put your hand over your heart.
Yep.
That's important, because the kids used to laugh at me. I would hear God Bless America or the national anthem, and the tears would run, and my kids would laugh at me. And now my daughter does the same thing.
Yep. My daughter Pam tells the story of the movie Hacksaw Ridge had come out. Well, it was on TV, Netflix, and I was going to watch it, and she said, "Oh, Mother, how can you watch that?" I couldn't. And I looked at her, I said, "Yeah, you can. If they lived it, you can watch it. That's where you're going to get your understanding of what they went through."
Yeah.
And so she did, and she'll tell that story today. just like with me with Platoon.
Uh-huh.
Hers was Hacksaw Ridge,
Yeah.
you know, and it's, if you don't see it in real life, you don't understand it.
Tom said when we watched Platoon, he said, I can smell it.
Oh, I bet.
Mm,
I
He
bet.
said, I can smell it.
yeah.
He said, that smell is just permeates me right now.
Now, did he have any Agent Orange exposure or?
Yeah, I think they all had some Agent Orange exposure. I blame Vietnam for his kidney disease. But when he went, he had none of what they call presumptive
Okay.
things that automatically, and he had a very bad experience with Vietnam, or with the VA. When he came home from Vietnam, a guy he had served with was down at Fitzsimmons. And Tom went down to see him. And he came back and he said, I will never allow the VA to touch me after what I saw down there. They had him strapped to the bed.
Yeah.
And
That was the really horrible time with the Veterans Administration
And-
and our government too. You know, we send them off to war to fight for our country, and then they come home and they're not treated the way they should be.
Right.
You know, we allow, and I don't mean this derogatively, we allow the immigrants to come into our country and welcome them, and we should, to that certain degree. But we should be taking care of our veterans before we take care of anybody else.
absolutely.
They served, we should be paying their insurance. We should be taking care of these men and women who give to us. And I don't know that our country has I've ever felt that our country has ever done that. Really, I have a friend whose dad was in Second World War. He marched across, I think he was in Company C, I can't remember. He marched across in all that snow, sucking on a turkey bone that he had. And he got frostbitten feet. His name was Al Connor. And the man, maybe a couple years before he died, finally got compensation for his frostbitten feet. I mean, it's just like, it's terrible that we don't take care of our veterans better than what we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's improved.
Yeah.
But if it weren't for organizations like Tunnels to Towers, I mean, they do a lot for the
Okay.
vets.
Right.
And our government still does it, I don't believe.
Well, I remember coming to you guys' house when Tommy was so sick. And he had said, I'm not going to do anything. I don't want to do anything with the vets. And I said, Tommy, you got to think of it this way. He knew what his destination was at that time. And I said, try to get some of it so that Jan will be protected, you know. And I think
He did.
he did.
He did. He went. See, Ady could convince anybody.
And and convincing Tommy
was not easy.
But it was like a big sister lecturing him, you know.
Right.
This is yours. This is yours. You take anything you can get.
Yep.
And for her, you take that. You know, it was just important that.
Yeah.
And you know, he was a good man, and I almost think alcoholism should be on that list
Should
of
be.
presumptive,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
because so many of our vets are drug addicted or alcohol
Alcoholics.
addicted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why?
I mean,
Because
they
think of what
suffered.
they went through.
They suffered.
Right.
They suffered silently through PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also we heard from some of the vets too, the availability of alcohol in when they were serving, the commonness of it and just using it as a way to cope.
Well,
Began in Vietnam.
yeah, and drugs. I think that's when drugs really began.
Yeah.
And
More.
Tom said, I never did any drugs. He said, but the booze,
Oh, yeah.
he said we had plenty of hard liquor, we had plenty of beer. He said, and you got those things before you got food.
Yeah. Well, Robert, my husband, was in the Army, and he said he never smoked until he went into the service. But they gave him to him free, so you know,
Yeah.
it was free. So
Yeah.
But they provided the booze and the cigarettes,
But not the healthcare later.
but not the
but not
healthcare
the
later.
healthcare.
Okay, let me ask you one or two more questions. One is about what was going on in Boulder. So there was a lot more anti-war sentiment in Boulder. Did you know that was happening? How did people in Louisville feel about that? And did any of that ever spill into Louisville?
I was working in Boulder, so yeah, I saw it. I've spent the majority of my working life in nonprofits.
Okay.
So that's a very liberal group of people. So I think I was exposed to it, but I didn't go home and tell Tom a lot of it because I knew it would upset him.
Yeah.
And I just kind of, toot your own horn, do what you want to do. It's not how I feel.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true even today. Boulder is so liberal.
Well, they are. Yeah, Boulder's a liberal town. You know.
And I think it's a university. I think any
Yeah.
university town is probably more liberal.
I used to look down on the protesters. They used to just irritate the hell out of me. And then you grow and you have wonderful neighbors and you find out that they were protesters. And then you find out what it was really all about, that it was to try to save a part of a country from becoming communist. And so I look at it a little differently now because, and of course, they were in college and they had that idealism when you're in college, you're learning all this stuff and that, and so to march against
They
what was
marched
going on.
against the war,
The
Right.
war, yeah.
not
against
individuals.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It
And
was,
once you learn that, it's like, oh, well,
yeah. Let's get this over with. This is
bring our boys home.
we're never we're not winning, we're not going forward, we're not. And so they actually did fight for bringing our soldiers home, and it was a very difficult time, very difficult time with the protests and everything,
Yeah.
And then, like I say, people didn't understand the whole concept of why are we there, to prevent communism.
But
Yeah.
you didn't hear that. You didn't see any of that type of stuff in Louisville, or no one talked about even being.
I don't remember anything
I don't
like
remember
that.
anything like that.
That's what most people say.
Trying to think, during the Labor Day parades when they had, I don't ever remember in Louisville somebody out.
Yeah.
I'm sure maybe they did, but I'm not to my knowledge. Yeah.
I don't remember anything
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. And then I guess, is there any last thing that you would hope to either see in this article or that you would want readers who maybe didn't live in Louisville at this time to take away about Louisville in this era and about Louisville's reaction to the Vietnam War and involvement in the Vietnam War?
I think I would want people to take away that we cared about our boys.
Mm-hmm.
They went over boys and came home men.
Yeah.
And
there were some women,
and the
although
women.
we were told there are no women in Vietnam. There are no women in Vietnam. I mean, I could hear the president saying that. There are no women in Vietnam. Yet the nurses.
The nurses were
Yeah.
there.
And they, women held other jobs too,
Yeah.
But back then, well, you weren't, being over there was not ladylike. It was not something that, well, the Second World War too,
Yeah.
But honor, that's what I want. Honor. Teach your children to honor the history. And even honor the protests, because it's helped change
Yeah.
the picture of what happened,
And that we need to be patriots. We need to honor our country. It's where we're free.
Yeah.
And that's becoming such a reduced
Yes,
commodity today.
it is.
We watch the world and the freedoms being eaten away.
Yeah.
And I would want people to realize that we instilled that. Our parents instilled it in us, and we instilled it in our children.
Yeah.
And our children's children
Right.
are still patriots.
Yeah.
I can remember one time being at the Labor Day parade, and a couple of my grandchildren did not stand up when the flag went by. And the next year I was going to the parade, and they thought they were going to go with me, and I said, no. Well, why can't we go, Nana? Because you don't think you should stand up for the flag when the flag goes by. And I think you should. Sorry, but when that flag goes by, you stand up and you put your hand over your heart. That's the only way you get to go with me. They went. Yeah,
All right. I'm so sorry. I thought of one other question I forgot to ask you, which is correspondence. So how did you keep in touch with your brother, your boyfriend? Did you write? How often? Did you ever record a reel-to-reel, any type of audio, or have any phone calls, or was it just letters?
Just letters.
Letters.
Yeah.
And I know I was reading over some of that Roger had, and it was, in the beginning, it was always, send money. Can you please send me some money? But.
Well, they made like $20 a month or
Yeah,
something.
right.
Yeah, so.
They made very little money over there, even with their combat pay.
Yeah. So how often do you think you wrote them?
Oh, probably, I know my mother wrote almost probably weekly, and my grandmother's, and of course we were kids, so once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Great. What about care packages? I know Louisville sent some care packages. Did you all ever participate in any of that?
My mother-in-law constantly sent care packages.
Yeah.
Tom would laugh that she would send him cans of like Chef Boyardee
Oh, really?
spaghetti sauce.
Okay.
And
What about Spam? Oh, they got Spam though. Yeah, they got Spam. Yeah.
Macaroni, and they would take and put water in their steel pots, their helmets, and cook the macaroni over C4.
Oh, wow.
And they would have their Italian feast.
Okay.
And my mother also, because my brother was in the Navy, and it was the 50s, late 50s, and they were off the coast of Laos at the time.
Okay.
And she would bake and send stuff to my brother all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a good story about the helmet. Any other funny stories about food or weather that anything they told you about getting caught in the rain or?
Rain.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the rainy season. Tom said they were drenched constantly. Yeah. If they weren't walking in it, it was pouring down on them.
Yeah. I think one of the stories that I just remember Roger saying was, I knew things before the president knew things.
Mm.
Being in communications, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
true.
yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I worked with a gentleman who was a pilot
Okay.
in Vietnam. And we would sit and talk, and I'd tell him stories about Tom, and he would say, I have to thank you. He said, I'm the guy that flew over with the bombs that I dropped. He said, and then I'd go back to base, I'd go to the officers club, I'd take a shower, go to the officers club, and have a few drinks.
Mm-hmm.
He
His
said,
work was over then.
he said, I didn't ever experience
Yeah.
what those guys did.
Yeah.
How many medals did Tom get?
He has a lot. He has the big ones are the Bronze Star with the V device. And that was for pulling guys out of danger.
Okay.
And the Purple Heart for when he got shot.
Okay.
Those were the
Yeah.
big ones he's got.
And did Roger get any?
I don't know that he
Okay.
did, because, you know, where he was, yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, he was in
Yeah.
combat. And I don't know if you have a copy of this or not, but Diane Marino wrote about the Vietnam Wall, things you never knew.
Okay.
And I was reading this,
Okay.
and I thought, how did I get this? What, you know? I mean, it's got all kinds of information about one family who lost 6 sons. So, and she was a teacher, so.
Right.
And then I got to the last page, and it says, these are statistics from our side. Can you imagine the lives lost and changed for, how much it changed for both sides? And she said, in memory of all warriors, with special mention going to friend Johnny Manzanares and Francis Connor, beloved brother to my friend Alice Connor Hall. May they rest in peace. And that's when I knew it had to be Diane that wrote it, because Alice and I and Diane kind of all, you know,
Yeah.
were friends.
Okay.
And in fact, I called Alice today, this morning. I said, did Diane write that? Because I don't want to say anything unless I know for sure that she did. And she said, yeah.
She said, yeah. Yeah, if I can make a copy of that, that would
Yeah,
be great.
it's the statistics are so around.
Okay. Any last thing before I turn this off that you'd like to share?
Well, I think we need to keep the stories of going. And like Jan says, teach your children and your grandchildren the importance of being patriotic and being thankful for what these people do for us.
Yeah.
And we have, it's a privilege to vote, but in the time we're in right now, we're obligated, I believe, to go and express our feelings,
That's right.
whether you're a Republican or a Democrat.
That's right.
It doesn't make any difference. If you're an independent,
Yeah.
you need to go
And vote.
and vote.
Yes.
Yep.
That's how we maintain our freedoms.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.